Okay, so you guys wanted to really take a deep dive into the present perfect simple tense.
Yes.
And I think this is a great idea because even though I consider myself like pretty good with English grammar,
Hmm.
I find this is one of those tenses that people really kind of um, get tripped up on sometimes.
Yes, definitely. I hear you on that.
So,
It's one of those things that, yeah, it can feel a bit tricky.
yeah. And we have this awesome resource that it explains it in detail.
Yeah,
And I think our job today is to make it so that it feels intuitive.
absolutely.
You don't have to remember a bunch of rules. You just kind of get a feel for it.
Exactly.
So let's first look at like the structure of it.
Right.
Like how do we actually form this tense?
Okay, so when we're talking about the positive form of the present perfect simple, we're essentially looking at two main components.
Okay.
You have the auxiliary verb have or has, and then you combine that with the past participle of the main verb.
Got it.
So it's like a two-part recipe.
Yeah.
You've got your have or has, and then you've got your past participle. Now, for regular verbs, creating that past participle is usually a pretty straightforward process. You just add "ed" to the base form of the verb.
Right. Like play becomes played.
Exactly. Play becomes played, walk becomes walked.
Easy peasy.
Yeah. But of course, English being English, there are always a few little exceptions.
Oh, there are always exceptions.
Right. Some regular verbs have a slight spelling change before you add that "ed."
Okay.
So, for example, you have study, which becomes studied.
Oh, right. Where you swap the Y for E.
Exactly.
Ah.
And then, of course, we have the wonderful world of irregular verbs.
Yes, the irregular verbs, the wild cards.
Exactly. We won't dive into all of those today.
No, that could be a whole other episode.
It's definitely a whole other deep dive. But it's important to remember that they exist
Yeah,
and that those past participles just need to be learned.
like memorized, basically.
Yeah. And when we're speaking, we often use those contracted forms.
Oh, yeah, like the short forms.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I have played becomes I've played, you have worked, becomes
Yeah.
you've worked, he has written, becomes he's written.
Much more natural.
Right. It's just a more concise way of saying it.
So that's for the positive statement.
Yeah.
Now, what about if we want to say that something has not happened?
Okay, so for the negative form of the present perfect simple, it's actually quite simple.
Okay.
You just add the word not after have or has.
Right. So I have eaten breakfast becomes I have not eaten breakfast.
That's right. Or in the contracted form, I haven't eaten.
Perfect.
And similarly, you have not been to Italy becomes you haven't been.
Gotcha.
And he has not seen that new art exhibit becomes he hasn't seen.
So it's pretty straightforward. You're just slipping that not in there.
Exactly.
Okay. So we've got the positive, we've got the negative now. How do we turn these statements into questions?
All right. So for yes/no questions in the present perfect simple, you essentially invert the subject and the auxiliary verb have or has.
Okay. So you flip them.
Yeah. So instead of saying you have lived here long, you would ask, have you lived here long? Other examples would be, have I missed the important announcement?
Yeah.
Or has she finished her assignment already?
So you just move the have or has to the front.
Right.
Makes sense.
And then for questions that start with those question words, like what, where, when, or why, you simply place the question word at the very beginning.
Okay. So before the have or has.
Exactly. So you would have, where have I misplaced my phone this time?
Mm-hmm.
Or what have you been working on lately?
Okay.
And why has the meeting been rescheduled?
Got it.
So the structure remains pretty consistent.
So now we know like the mechanics of it,
Right.
like how to actually form the present perfect simple. But the more interesting part, I think, is when and why we use it,
Yeah. That's the real heart of it, isn't it?
right? Like, what are the situations where this tense is the right choice?
Absolutely. And our resource outlines several key scenarios where the present perfect simple comes into play.
Perfect.
So let's dive into those.
Oh.
One of the most common uses is for action states or even habits that began in the past but are still continuing into the present moment.
Oh, so it's something that started before now and is still happening.
Exactly. It's like a bridge between the past and the now.
Yeah.
And we often use the time expressions since and for with the present perfect simple to specify that duration.
Right. Like how long something has been going on.
Exactly.
And the resource mentions that this usage often pops up with stative verbs.
Yes. Stative verbs are those verbs that describe a state of being rather than an action.
Okay.
So verbs like know, believe, love, own, These are all stative verbs.
So they're not about something you're actively doing.
Right. They describe a state or a condition that is true or exists.
Makes sense.
And because they describe something that is rather than something that's being done, they fit naturally with the idea of an ongoing situation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, for example, you could say, I've known my best friend since we were kids.
Ah.
That shows that the friendship started in the past and continues to this day.
Yeah, and that's a classic example of a stative verb, know.
Right. Or, she's lived in the city for 10 years.
Another stative verb, live.
Exactly, indicating that her residency started a decade ago and is still ongoing.
Still there.
Still there.
Okay, and what about since versus for?
Ah, yes. The classic since and for dilemma.
They can be a little tricky.
They can be, but the key is to remember that since always points to a specific starting point in the past.
Okay, so like a fixed point in time.
Exactly. Could be a year, like since 2005.
Right.
A specific date, like since last Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
Or even a past event, like since the Olympics or since I graduated.
So it's like marking the beginning of something.
Precisely. So, for instance, you could say, he's worked at that company since 2010.
Go ahead.
Or, I haven't eaten spicy food since that one time I got really sick.
Oh, yeah, I think we've all been there.
Or, they've lived in that house since they got married.
So since anchors us to that specific moment when something began.
Exactly.
All right, and how does for work then?
Okay, so for indicates a duration of time, a period of time.
Okay, so not a specific point, but like a length of time.
That's right. It could be 5 minutes, 2 weeks, several months, many years.
Got it.
So you could say, she's been a doctor for 15 years.
Okay.
I haven't slept properly for days.
Oh.
Or they've been waiting for the bus for over an hour.
Yeah, so for answers that question of how long.
Exactly.
Okay, I think that distinction between since as the starting point and for as the duration, that's really helpful.
It's a key distinction to keep in mind.
Absolutely. All right, what else do we have on our list of present perfect simple uses?
Another very important one is when we're talking about finished actions, but with a connection to life experience.
Okay, so things that have happened in someone's life, but the exact timing isn't the focus.
Exactly. And the person we're talking about needs to be alive. So it's about whether they've had a particular experience, not necessarily when it happened.
Gotcha.
And we often use ever and never in these cases.
Yeah, those often pop up with life experiences.
So you could say, I have traveled to South America.
Okay.
And that simply means you've had the experience of being in South America at some point.
The exact details aren't important.
Right. Or she has met several famous musicians.
That's cool.
It just communicates that she's had those encounters, and then we have never seen the Northern Lights.
Oh, I would love to see those someday.
Me too. It's definitely on my bucket list.
So that just means you haven't had that particular life experience yet.
Exactly.
All right, moving right along. What's next?
Okay, so another use of the present perfect simple is with what we call unfinished time words.
Unfinished time words.
Yeah, so words like today, this week, this month, this year.
Yeah.
But the crucial thing is that the time period is still ongoing.
So like today isn't over yet.
Right, exactly. So you could say, I haven't checked my email today, implying that there's still time to do so.
Right, the day isn't finished.
Exactly. Or he's already had 3 phone calls this morning.
Wow, busy morning.
Right, and again, the morning is still in progress, so there could be more calls.
Yeah.
Another example, they've hired 2 new employees this quarter.
Okay, so the time frame is still open.
Exactly.
And the really important thing to remember here is that we can't use the present perfect simple with finished time words, right?
That's right. So we can't use it with words like yesterday or last year.
Because those time periods are over.
Exactly. So you wouldn't say, I've seen him yesterday.
No, that sounds wrong.
It does, because yesterday is a finished time period.
So in that case, we'd use the simple past.
Right? I saw him yesterday.
Okay, so finished time equals simple past.
Uh-huh.
Unfinished time within an ongoing period equals present perfect simple.
You got it.
Crystal clear.
Perfect.
Okay, so we've talked about unfinished actions, life experiences, unfinished time periods. Now, what about this idea of finished actions, but with a result in the present?
Yeah, this one can be a little tricky.
Yeah, it seems a bit more subtle.
It is. It's a nuanced use, but it's really important for understanding how the present perfect simple works. Okay. So here we're focusing on an action that was completed in the past, but its consequences are still felt or relevant in the present moment.
Okay, so the past action has a direct impact on the now.
Exactly. The present perfect acts as a bridge connecting that past event to its present effect.
I see.
And the resource mentions that sometimes the simple past could also be used in these situations,
Okay.
especially in American English.
Right.
But the present perfect often emphasizes that present result a little bit more strongly.
Gotcha.
So, for example, I've lost my keys
Oh, no.
emphasizes that I am currently locked out.
Yeah, because you still don't have your keys.
Exactly, whereas I lost my keys just focuses on the past event of losing them.
Right. It doesn't really highlight that you're still without them.
That's right. So the present perfect really keeps the focus on the present consequence of that past action.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Here are a few more examples. She's broken her arm, so she can't write today.
Oh, dear.
The breaking happened in the past, but it directly affects her ability to write right now.
Yeah, she's still dealing with that broken arm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another one, they've missed their flight, so they won't arrive on time.
Ugh, that's always stressful.
It is. The missing of the flight happened in the past, but it has a clear consequence in the present.
They're going to be late.
They're going to be late, and then I've eaten too much and now I feel sick.
Oh, I
Yeah.
think we've all been there too.
Definitely.
So in all those examples, the past action has a clear link to the current situation.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, what about this use of the present perfect simple for recently finished actions?
Okay, so this is another interesting one. Even if there isn't a clear ongoing result, like in the previous examples, we often use the present perfect to talk about things that have just happened.
So it's like breaking news.
Exactly. It's like bringing the very recent past right into the present moment.
And again, the past simple is often also grammatically correct in these situations.
It is, especially in American English.
Mm-hmm.
But the present perfect can give that extra sense of immediacy and relevance.
Like it's hot off the press.
Exactly.
Okay.
And we often see words like just yet, already, and recently with this use.
Okay, those kind of signal that something has happened very recently.
Exactly. So, for example, you could say, the president has just announced new policies.
Okay, so that feels like we're getting that news right now.
Exactly.
Right.
Or I've recently seen that movie you recommended.
Mm-hmm.
Connecting that past viewing experience to the current conversation.
Yeah, so it's still fresh in your mind.
Right. And then the company has launched a new product line.
It's new and noteworthy.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm getting this.
Great.
Now let's tackle a pair that I know can be confusing.
Okay.
Been versus gone as the past participles of to go in the present perfect.
Yes. This is a classic point of confusion for many English learners.
It's all about those subtle differences.
It is, but once you understand the key distinction, it becomes much clearer.
So let's break it down.
All right, so when we use been as the past participle of go in the present perfect, it generally implies that the person visited a place and has since returned.
Okay, so they went somewhere and came back.
Exactly. It often ties back to that idea of life experience.
Like, I've been to Paris. Means I went to Paris at some point in my life, but now I'm back home.
Precisely. Or she's been to the dentist today.
Okay.
Implies that she went for her appointment and has now returned.
Right.
And they have never been to Australia. Means they haven't had that travel experience, and they are also not there currently.
Makes sense. So been emphasizes the completion of the trip.
Yes, it's like a round trip.
Okay, got it. What about gone then?
Okay, so gone typically indicates that the person went to a place and is still there.
Okay, so they're still at their destination.
That's right. And this often aligns with the use of the present perfect for an action with a present result.
Like the result is that they're currently at that place.
Exactly. So, for example, he's gone to the library means that his current location is the library.
Right. He's not here. He's at the library.
Exactly.
Right.
Or my parents have gone to a concert.
So they're at the concert right now. And she's gone to Italy for the summer. I mean, she's currently in Italy and will be there for the entire summer.
Gotcha. So with gone, the emphasis is on their absence from the speaker's location and their presence elsewhere.
Okay. That makes perfect sense.
So the key takeaway is been equals visited and returned.
Yes.
And gone equals went and is still there.
Super clear.
Excellent.
Wow, we have covered so much ground today.
We have.
I feel like we've really explored the present perfect simple from every angle.
Absolutely.
So let's just take a moment to recap those key takeaways for our listeners.
Okay, so the present perfect simple is all about connecting the past to the present.
Yeah, it's like a bridge between those two time frames.
Right, and we use it for unfinished action states or habits that are still going on.
Often with those trusty since and for to tell us how long.
Exactly. It's also our go-to tense for talking about life experiences without needing to pinpoint the exact timing.
Just whether you've done something or not.
Right, and we use it for events that happen within time periods that are still ongoing.
like today or this month.
Precisely. And then it's also super useful for highlighting past actions that have a direct result or relevance in the present moment.
Like those examples with the lost keys, the broken arm, the missed flight.
Exactly. Those really show how the past action affects the now.
Yeah. And then finally, mastering the difference between been and gone.
Yes. That's crucial for accurate communication.
You've been for round trips, gone for when you're still there.
You've got it.
All right. So listeners, hopefully you now have a much clearer understanding of not just the how of forming the present perfect simple, but also the why and the when of using it.
Yes, it's more than just a grammar rule. It's about how we communicate the relationship between past events and our present reality.
Exactly. And that's something we do all the time in our everyday conversations.
Absolutely.
So as you go about your day, think about how you describe recent events or ongoing situations.
Right.
How might your choice between the present perfect simple and the simple past subtly shift the emphasis or meaning of what you're trying to say?
That's a great question to ponder.
It is, because sometimes those subtle choices can really make a difference in how our message is understood.
Absolutely. Exploring these nuances can deepen your appreciation for the power of language.
And how it shapes our perception of time.
Exactly.
All right, well, that's it for our deep dive into the present perfect simple tense.
Thanks for joining us.
I'll see you next time.
See you later.